How do you know whether using no-code tools is the right solution for the type of app you want to build? You may very well have an app idea and know exactly what you want to create, but this might be the question that's holding you back from taking those next steps and actually bringing that app idea to life. So in this video, I want to help you understand whether no-code tools are the right solution for you so that you can take those next steps forward. Now, in this video, we're going to answer three big questions. The first is, will no-code tools support the type of app you're wanting to build in the first place? Obviously, this is the most important thing to answer before you go any further. And the second thing we're going to talk about is what the pros and cons of using no-code tools are, and specifically as they relate to your own use cases. And the third thing we're going to talk about is whether or not your app will be able to scale using no-code tools, or whether you'll have to eventually switch to maybe a more custom coded solution down the road. These are likely some of the questions you've asked yourself as you're moving forward or as you're hoping to move forward. So that's what we're going to cover in today's video. Now make sure you stick around until the end, because if you do decide to use no-code tools for your app, I have a free training that I want to share with you that'll help you take the next steps and get started in the best ways possible with your app. So first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No-Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to help start or scale their businesses with no coding required and no technical background required. So let's dive right in. We're going to kind of jump around to the whiteboard. We're going to look at some tools, and we're really just going to spend some time breaking this down. Now, the first thing that I want to make completely clear is I believe strongly that you should be using no-code tools for whatever app it is that you're trying to build. Now, before you think I'm going to give you a biased view for the rest of this video, know that I say that for a reason. So it's really important that you understand my own perspective so that you can also use what I'm going to share with you in the best way possible for your own needs, your own goals, and your own use cases. Now, I'm not the type of person who loves using new tools just for the sake of using new tools. I'm not the type of person who jumps around to all the new tech, all the new gadgets, all the new tools and all of that. I don't have shiny object syndrome. I'm not the type of person who just looks for new tools constantly. Now, that does describe a lot of people who love the no-code space, because there are a ton of no-code tools that you can use for lots of different things. And it actually describes other members of the Coaching No-Code Apps team very well. This is something that you'll see across lots of people who love no-code. They are really prone to using just new tools. They really love getting their hands on stuff like that. They love to tinker. From my perspective, I am the type of person who loves using no-code tools to achieve a very specific outcome, and to achieve that outcome in a better and more scalable way than I otherwise could without using no-code tools. That's how I approach this. And so no-code tools are really, really great for that. If you're looking to scale a business, especially in a lean way, no-code tools are fantastic. But the reason why I want to say this is because know that I'm giving you an unbiased view here. I'm going to be talking through all of these different questions and different scenarios to help you make the best decision. But know that for lots of different reasons, whether you're the type of person who loves using and exploring new tools, or whether you're the type of person who really just wants the best possible solution that's going to be scalable and beneficial long-term, know that this applies to you, and that's the perspective that we're approaching this from. All right. So with that out of the way, I want to talk about question number one, and this is a big one for anyone considering using no-code tools. Will no-code tools support the type of app you're looking to build? Now, what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're going to jump over to the whiteboard because we're going to talk through a number of things here. And I want to make sure we have all this down. So, will no-code tools support the type of app you're looking to build? Well, let's talk about some different scenarios and different types of apps you might be building. Now, I'm going to go through different types of apps based on what we see a lot of people building, what our own clients are building, and what they're using no-code tools for. So there are four main categories that we kind of like to look at when using no-code tools. So let's look at types of apps, and we'll break this off into just four different sections here. So the first type of app you might be looking to build is one that is going to help you maybe transition out of your existing career or your existing job, your existing business even, into a more scalable app-based business model. So if you're building this type of app, you are likely the type of person who has a lot of industry experience. Maybe you have had a career for years or even decades in a certain industry, and you have a lot of knowledge. And so you want to, instead of having a career within that industry, you want to package up your knowledge and put that into an app, because by creating an app and selling an app that provides a solution for your industry, it's a much more scalable business model, and it can allow you to transition away from the day-to-day kind of 9-to-5 thing that you might be doing and into something that gives you more freedom, more flexibility, something like that. Now, we see lots and lots of entrepreneurs who are coming to the no-code space building this type of app. Now, I'm calling this a type of app. Obviously, this is still broad. It's still a little bit vague, but the main thing to sort of keep in mind, or the way I categorize this, is you want to transition into an app-based business. Now, a business it's different than a startup. A business is something that you're growing to support yourself, your family, a certain lifestyle. It's something like that, something that you want to grow to be reliable over the long term, versus something that you want to scale really, really quickly. It might be a lot more expensive and that you want to exit, right? A business is something that you're growing and you want to focus on more for the long term. Now, a couple examples of this to help give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So a really great example of this is one of our past clients, Piers. So he was a consultant, and he worked largely on an hourly basis. So his service-based business, it was doing well. It was supporting him, but it wasn't scalable. And so what he did instead is he took his expertise and he packaged it up into an app that would serve the same market, serve the same audience and customers. And in fact, he could take his existing customers and clients and move them onto an app that supported them in just a different, more scalable way. And he was able to transition into an app-based business model, open up a lot more flexibility and freedom for himself, and grow a more scalable, reliable business. Okay, so we see lots of service-based businesses doing this, or business owners, lots of consultants, freelancers, or again, like I said, people who have had long-term careers in a certain industry. Another example of this is one of our past clients, Chris. He had a long career in a certain industry related to human resources, and he had tons and tons of knowledge related to this industry. He knew about all the different problems they face, all the different solutions they currently use, and all the reasons why those existing solutions weren't really working maybe, or ways in which they could be a lot better. And so he took all of that knowledge and he packaged it up into an application so that he could transition out of that career and out of that normal 9 to 5 and move into a scalable app-based business model. So that's the first type of app that you might be building. Now, to give you some more context on these different categories, to see which one you might fall into, another one is, and I kind of touched on this, but if you're wanting to launch a startup. Now, I like to differentiate the business and the startup because you do treat them differently. And depending on which one you are looking to build and grow, you might use no-code tools differently, both at the start and in the long term. So whereas a business is something that you might grow a little bit more slowly, but you're usually going to grow it more so over the long term. It's going to be a little bit more reliable generally. You are probably going to maintain more ownership or potentially full ownership, right? That's more so a business. A startup is a little bit different. A startup is something that you're trying to grow really, really quickly, and you're trying to grow to a very, very large scale. You are generally looking for investment and funding, and you're usually looking to exit the startup. So it's something that you usually pump a lot of money into to grow really quickly and really big. Profit margins usually aren't all that great, but the valuation can be high. And so you can attempt an exit to sell and either leave or remain as an employee or something like that for that startup. So business and startup, a little bit different. Now, no-code tools are excellent for building the types of businesses that we talked about, but they can be used for startups as well. There are a few other factors that you want to consider when you are creating a startup, but no-code tools can be perfect for startups. They can be so incredibly useful because the idea of a startup is that it usually takes a lot more money to grow something so quickly to such a high valuation. And it can be hard to do that. It can be hard to get the money, number one, and then to sort of create that balancing act as you're trying to grow. Well, no-code tools can be sort of like a lifeline when you're trying to do that, because they can cut your costs down just dramatically and allow you to scale a lot more quickly. So one of the things that you might be thinking about if you fall more so into this category is that when you are bringing investors on board, if they're not familiar with no-code tools, you might be worried that they won't want to invest in your software because they don't necessarily know how it's built. If you're building on a no-code platform, you might not have access to your source code. And so there are some of these caveats where with people who come from more traditional backgrounds with traditional programming, they might not fully understand it, and therefore they might not fully trust it. But keep in mind that just because some people might not trust it, it usually is because they don't fully understand it. The good thing is the no-code space in general, it's growing at a really, really quick rate. I mean, every time you turn around, there's a different news article about no-code. Every time you turn around, there's a new platform. Every time you turn around, there's a new startup built on no-code. It's all over the place. So first thing is that mindset that you will still see, it's going to go away. But the other thing to remember is that with no-code tools, you don't have to stay on no-code forever. I'm not saying that you should anticipate moving off of no-code, and we'll talk more about this later. But know that no-code tools are excellent for building early traction, saving a ton of money, and that's really important when you're in a startup, and just moving really quickly. Also really important with startups. You can switch over later on if you need to. But oftentimes you'll realize that you won't need to. You know, we have a client, Kevin, who's a great example of this. He is going the startup route, and when he was looking at using no-code tools, it was for the exact reasons I just described. He wanted to build quick traction, validate early on, and really just scale early with the intent of eventually moving off no code, moving to a coded solution. But once he got into things and once he really started getting his hands on these no code tools and building out this application, he realized I actually probably don't need to switch over from no code to a coded solution like I thought I would. Now, that's just going to allow him to scale even faster to an even higher level earlier on because he doesn't have to worry about all of that. So know that if you fall into the startup category, no-code tools can be an excellent solution for you to really start moving quickly. Now, the next category that I want to chat through is it starts to focus more on people who have their own existing businesses. So if you have your own business and you're wanting to keep that business, so you're not wanting to transition into an app-based business model necessarily, but you want to add an application onto your existing business, no-code tools are really, really great for you too. And we use no-code tools to run all parts of our business as well. And so we'll talk more about that too. But there are two sort of subcategories if you are building an app for your existing business. Now, the first one is if you are wanting to scale your internal operations. So you're scaling internal business operations. So let's say you currently have a lot of manual processes that happen within your business that are very tedious. Maybe you have some kind of automated processes. Maybe they happen on spreadsheets and things like that, but there still is a lot of tedious work, manual error, human error, things like that. Using no-code tools to implement automated internal operations in your business can be just an absolute game changer for you because it can remove the need for those manual processes, which reduces the human error. Obviously, that's beneficial just for your own internal operations, but especially if you are working with clients or customers, reducing that human error can be the difference in keeping a customer or potentially losing a customer. It can make a huge difference in the amount of time that you have to spend on your business or in your business. Instead of having to either spend more time yourself just doing these tedious, repetitive processes, or maybe even hiring someone else to do them, you can eliminate the need for that altogether and customize a no-code app, build a customized app to take over these operations in the exact way that you need. I mean, it can save so much time and so much money. A couple of examples of this. One would be a client, Tony, who came to us with a successful business, an online business. It was related to drop shipping, so buying and selling online. And a lot of his processes involved communicating with different vendors and different people. And he wanted to automate a lot of that because he personally was spending hours every single day in his business doing these things himself. And for him, that was taking his time away from things that mattered more, whether it was higher priority items in his business or even just spending more time with his family, right? You've probably experienced that, thinking, gosh, I have all of these repetitive tasks on my plate. If I could only get them off, I could leave an hour early every day from work or leave 2 hours early every day. So he created a complete internal operational system for his own business to just automate so many of these repetitive tasks. And he ended up saving himself 2 hours of his own time every single day. Think about how life-changing that can be, right? Whether you just want that time back for yourself, or whether now you have 2 hours every single day to focus on more profit-generating activities. Think about how much further you can scale your business. We had another client, Zach, and you might find that you can relate to him. A lot of people do. So for his business, he was paying to automate lots of his operations already. He was paying for lots of existing software solutions that were out of the box, and he was paying monthly subscriptions, annual subscriptions. and they were running his whole business. So he was having these things automated. He was using lots of different software platforms, and he was connecting them all together with things like Zapier, which allow these different platforms to communicate with each other so that things happen on their own. And that's all great. But the problem was he was paying a ton of money. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars every single year just so that these processes could be automated. And for a small business, that's huge. That's a lot for any business, but especially for a small business, small teams, you don't want to have to be spending $20, $30, $40, $50,000 a year just to pay for these different software platforms that realistically you could build yourself. And that's what Zach did. He came in and he used no-code tools to actually just build out his own platform to run his own business. So he cut his costs back just dramatically. And that allows him now to scale much more. And what we find a lot of people in that same situation doing is, when you're using out-of-the-box software solutions, generally they're built for larger markets, larger industries, or larger segments within industries. And they usually cost more, but lots of small businesses are more niche. And so while technically they can use these out-of-the-box systems, those systems or that software, it's not catered to these more niche small businesses. And so lots of compromises come with using them. So it's high costs and lots of compromises. And so what a lot of people do is when they come in and they create these systems for their own business, they know that there are other businesses just like theirs in their same niche where the existing software it doesn't cater to them specifically. And so these business owners create the systems for themselves and then package them up later on and sell them to other businesses like theirs too. And this opens up a new business opportunity, a new revenue stream, and more scalability. Okay, so you might fall into that category as well. And then the last one that I want to talk about is when you're looking to scale an existing business, but in a more customer-facing way. So I'm going to say scale external business operations. And you might be doing this if you're building an app that your customers or your clients will interact with in some way, but it helps automate processes or maybe give them a different experience, which allows you to potentially charge higher prices because now you're offering more value or something like that. So a good example of something like this would be one of our clients, Christopher. He had his own online business in the real estate space, and he was manually processing all of the leads that would come in. And this was taking a lot of his time, just processing and vetting these leads, much less than converting them and fulfilling on the back end. So what he did is he came in and he created an automated tool really that he attached to the front end of his business that customers came into. So it's kind of like one of the higher parts of his sales funnel, essentially, where leads came in and they went through this automated process that he built to qualify and vet themselves before then coming down lower in the sales funnel and actually now interacting with him to convert and then fulfill on the back end. And this is this provides a really massive benefit because for him, at least, he was spending 30 hours a week just going through and qualifying leads. If you run a business where you spend a lot of time qualifying your leads, you know how much or how impactful something like that could be. And that's certainly not the only use case. That's just one example of how, with him, he got 30 hours a week of his time back. And at the same time, he provided a better experience for the leads that were coming in, which will inevitably increase his conversion rate because it's faster. It's almost immediate, really. I mean, if a lead is going through a tool, right, then it expedites everything. It's a much better experience. And this can happen in lots of different ways. Another thing we see people doing is people who do have often service-based businesses, again, consultancies, things like that, agencies, they'll build tools for their internal clients and customers to use. So maybe they offer services and they start building an app to sort of couple along with those services. Maybe they build a portal for their clients or their customers. Maybe they build something to manage those and to make sure that everyone is getting a good experience. And we did that with our business. There are lots of different ways that you can create tools to help just tack onto your business. I call this really adding a new arm to your business. And it really just helps create a more scalable business. It can bring in more revenue, give you way more time back, lots and lots of different benefits. Okay, so this should cover most of the different types of apps, or it should at least cover the type of app that you might be building. You can probably fit yourself into one of these categories, but the next thing you want to sort of figure out is, okay, so your app falls into one of these categories and no-code tools can help you build your app. But there are lots of no-code tools out there. And so what you might have found at this point is you're considering no-code tools, and maybe you have seen even that there are other apps that might be like yours. There are other apps out there that are being built. But then you start looking at the no-code tools and things get a little bit more confusing. You know, which no-code tools are right for you? How do you know if for all of your specific and custom needs, how do you know that there are certain tools that are really going to fill all the holes and all the gaps that you have? And so I want to talk about some of the different types of no-code tools that you could be using. And there are two sort of buckets that we're going to put these no-code tools into. Let me scroll up here. So the first is we'll call it the stringing together no-code tools. Okay, so you can use lots of different no-code tools and software platforms to cover different parts or different features or different functionalities that your app might need. So you can find a combination of different tools and you can sort of string them together and help them communicate with each other using something like Zapier, for example, and we'll go more into that in just a minute. Or you can use a full no-code platform. Okay, so you can also find a platform that allows you to build everything you want from scratch, and you don't have to quote unquote string anything together. You can also use a combination of these, and most people do. Most people end up using a combination. We do. But for talking through how to figure out whether no-code tools are right for you, we're going to break these up into two different categories. So if you are kind of stringing different no-code tools together, then what you're going to be doing is, let me just share a different tab here. You're probably going to be using something kind of like Zapier. Now, there are lots of different tools out there, but this one is a good example. So let's say you want to build an app that has features like scheduling. So you want to let people schedule something. There needs to be calendar functionality. You need, some sort of an external database potentially. Maybe you need a form that people should fill out. Customers coming in or clients coming in, they need to fill out a form, things like that. Well, if you don't want to build all of those things from scratch using no-code tools, for example, if you don't want to build a calendar or you don't want to build a form, you can use no-code tools that are existing tools and solutions that will provide each of those individual solutions. So you can find a no-code tool that lets you customize calendar functionality, that lets you customize a form or questionnaire functionality. And then you can use a tool like Zapier, which I have open here, that connects them. So let's say you want people to fill out a form, and if they submit a form, then you want to take them to a scheduling page. And if they if they book an appointment, then you want to save certain information from their form into your database, and on and on and on. But let's say we'll start with that. Well, let's see here, you could use a tool like Calendly, which is a simple booking platform, and you could create customized calendar availability. You could put your own information in there, and you could present this calendar to your customers, to your clients. Actually, we were going to start with a form. So let's just jump back up here. So let's say you have Typeform, right? You use Typeform. Same concept, but for different functionality. Typeform lets you create custom forms. So you just use their preset options to create whatever type of form you want. So your customer or your client comes on, they fill out the form that you've created, no coding, because Typeform just lets you kind of plug and play different options. And then let's say you connect Zapier to your Typeform and to your Calendly. So when a client goes through your Typeform, then they click submit on the form, then Zapier comes in and helps transfer them over and pull in information to Calendly, and then they go through the calendar process. And let's say you have Airtable, which lets you create your own databases, for example. Well, then let's say we use Zapier to save certain information in Airtable in your database. And you can see how we're kind of stringing things together. Now, this is just a very random example that I'm kind of pulling together as I'm looking at these tools on the Zapier page here. But hopefully you can see that you can string together really an entire business if you want to, or entire business operations even, just by coming into something like Zapier and using these different tools to create the types of functionality you need within your application. And you can, there's really no limit to what you can do with this. Okay, so if you're stringing something together, you could do it this way, and you could use these types of tools, and you don't ever really have to create anything of your own from scratch. All you have to do is find the tools you want to use. And right now on the screen here, I just have a page pulled up showing what types of apps work with Zapier. And if you scroll through, there are just tons of them. Okay, so you can kind of just choose the tools you want to use for the different types of functionality you need and connect them all with something like Zapier. So you can go that route, but you can also go the sort of full platform route. So if you are wanting to build everything from scratch, or if you're wanting to build the majority of your application from scratch, you want to have more so your own platform or your own tool, then you might use one main no-code app building platform to build that entire foundation. Now, this is what our clients are doing, or they're using a combination of the two. Sometimes if you are stringing a bunch of apps together, you might have already done that. You might be wanting to switch to creating your own full solution with an actual no-code app building platform. Okay, so in that case, you'd be using something like Bubble, for example. We like to use Bubble with our clients because it does let you create everything from scratch, but it also lets you connect to these outside services if you still want to. So you can create your own hub or your own full tool solution platform. If you want to, you can also still connect and still tack on these different services. And there's always a time and a place for that. And so those would be the two sort of categories of no-code tools that you might fall into. You probably have an idea already of which you would do. Now we're going to talk more about using full no-code app building platforms. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but know that if you're just looking to kind of string some things together, it's easy and quick to get up and running. And if that's all you need, then go for it. I mean, there's really no reason not to at least try and see if it suits your needs. And you can always switch over to a more all-encompassing solution once you need it. And that's what we're going to dive more into now, because that's what our own focus revolves around. So, okay, so we'll touch on that again, but the next thing I really want to dig into are the pros and cons of using no-code tools. Okay, so let's say that you are using, or you're at least looking for, a full no-code app building platform. You want to create something from scratch, and you're not sure whether you should move forward. Okay, what are the pros and cons? Now, remember, I think that you should be using no-code tools, and I say that I don't have to know anything else about you other than that you are watching this video. And if you're watching this video, it tells me that no-code tools will probably be a very viable solution for you. And you should at least try it out. You should at least see, because I mean, they just offer so many benefits. But we're going to go through some of the cons anyways, so that you can make the right decision for yourself. So we'll start with some of the positives. Now, we'll stick to just the top three in each category here. But the first really big benefit of using no-code tools, it's the speed and convenience. Okay, there is just no arguing with the fact that when you're using no-code tools, you can move so much more quickly than if you were to go the traditional coding route, and it's just incredibly more convenient. So speed and convenience, number one. Now, when you're using no-code tools, one thing I want you to keep in mind is, while they do offer this speed and convenience, you can build and launch an app so much more quickly than you could if you were to otherwise go the traditional programming route. It's still not an immediate solution. Okay, so keep in mind that even though you're using no-code tools, you still have to learn development fundamentals, right? You still have to learn how to use the tool that you're using, the no-code development platform you want to use, right? So you can move much more quickly with no-code tools, but there's still work involved. Okay, you have to understand that, and you have to come into this knowing that, because if you are not wanting to put in any time and effort on your part, then this wouldn't be the right solution. It might be the right solution to outsource using no-code tools, so outsource to a no-code development agency or something like that. But if you're wanting to build it yourself, know that it's still going to take time and effort on your part. But let's compare that to going the traditional programming route. Number one, if you're trying to learn how to code on your own, it's going to take a really long time. And not only that, it's going to take a really, really long time to actually get good at it. You might be able to pick up some fundamentals pretty quickly, but actually reaching more of an expert level where you can really benefit from that knowledge, it takes a really long time, and it's not very convenient because it's not easy. You're learning another language. With no-code tools, like I said, yes, you have to put in the time and the effort, but that is compressed significantly. So you can not only learn how to use no-code tools and learn the development fundamentals you need to use them effectively, you can not only learn all of that faster, but you can reach more of an expert level to where you can really leverage them to their full extent a lot faster as well. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about. They start learning how to use no-code tools. They realize that it takes maybe a little bit more time than they thought. And they think, well, why don't I just learn how to code instead? But while there might be that initial learning curve, it's just so much smaller and so much shorter. So the speed and convenience is huge. But even if you are looking at, potentially outsourcing to a traditional development agency versus using no-code tools yourself, even the speed at which a traditional development agency would be able to move with your app, that would be slower than how quickly you will be able to build your app. And I'm saying that based on what our own clients have told us after receiving quotes from traditional development agencies for time frame and for price and all of that. The speed at which they can build their own apps with no-code tools is usually a lot faster than if they were to outsource to a traditional development agency, and especially when you take into account the fact that when you're outsourcing, you really have to anticipate going through lots of revisions and lots of rounds of just changing or kind of redirecting them. Because, when you're using no-code tools, or when you're launching any app in general, you're going to be iterating a lot as you go. Even before you launch your app, you're going to be learning new things and you're going to be wanting to change your app before you ever even launch it. When you're outsourcing, that whole process moves a lot more slowly because you have to work with another team to convey your vision and have them implement it and then adjust it as you go. When you're using no-code tools, you cut out you cut out the other side. You're the one who's in control and you can move a lot more quickly. So the speed and the convenience are massive, massive benefits. The second thing is, and this should be probably no surprise, but the cost. Right? This is what brings a lot of people to the no-code space. It costs a lot less than if you were to outsource to a traditional development agency. Again, I mentioned talking about our own clients who have told us about the quotes that they've gotten from traditional development agencies. What might cost $100,000, $200,000 to outsource to a traditional development agency. If you were to outsource that to a no-code development agency, it might cost $15,000, $20,000, right? I mean, we're just slashing the price dramatically. And if you're building the app yourself with no-code tools, well, then you can obviously lower that even more. So you're taking this $100,000 price tag for the very initial slimmed down MVP that you were quoted by a traditional development agency, and you're now giving yourself the capability to build that even more quickly in a more convenient way and for a dramatically lower price tag. So that's a major benefit. And then the other one is use cases. You can use no-code tools in so many different scenarios. And this is something that a lot of people overlook as well. Once you build the initial app you want to build, you now have the skills to build lots of other apps too. So whether you want to build multiple apps over time, or whether you just want to build one app and then build different processes or automations, maybe to help run your business, so maybe on the internal side of things, you can do that. That's something we do. We're able to grow and operate in a really lean way Because anytime we need to create a process, we can just build it really, really quickly. And after you've built your first app and you understand those development fundamentals we talked about, you understand how to use the tools, well, you can apply those skills now to lots of different use cases. And those skills can serve you so well over time in so many different ways. So you're not just building an app faster, you're not just building an app for less money. You are building skills that you can leverage over time. So those are some of the major benefits and some of the reasons why we see people moving into the no-code space and then staying there long term. Now, there are some negatives, and I touched on this a little bit, but the first one is you still have to learn and do the work. So we'll write these over here. Right? You still have to learn and work. Some people coming into the no-code space, they think that they're going to be able to build an app overnight. Maybe they read about someone building Twitter in a day. Maybe they read a story about someone who, recreated another really big app in just a couple hours. Well, the reality is if someone is able to rebuild Twitter in a day, they probably already have those skills that we were talking about. They already know how to use no-code tools to build an app. They already have those development fundamentals. So you do have to spend the time, you have to invest the time into learning how to create an app, learning how to best leverage no-code tools. It's not a plug-and-play solution. So if you're not wanting to do that, then using no-code tools might not be right for you, or at least using no-code tools yourself. You can still outsource to a no-code development agency, but unless you are happy to put in the upfront time to create this new app, to create this new business, right? Then you need to kind of think of a different path forward for yourself. Now, this kind of builds on top of it, but if you don't like the idea of learning about application development, so let's step beyond just the fact that you do have to put in work if you want to create something that you're going to scale into a business or within your business, right? Let's look past that. The types of things that you're going to have to learn, you have to be willing and happy to learn about these topics and learn these skills. Development fundamentals. A lot of this, it's kind of like mind puzzles, right? You have to enjoy thinking through problems or thinking through solutions. Maybe not enjoy, but you have to be happy to do it, knowing that the return is going to be worth it. All right. So what I'm going to put here is mind puzzles. It's not to say that every single aspect of building an app, building a business is going to be something that you just absolutely love thinking through, right? There are always going to be challenges and always going to be things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you have to be able to enjoy the journey as much as you are looking towards the destination, okay? Because when you are using no-code tools, you have to think in a lot of different ways than you're probably used to. You have to think about structuring a database, right? You have to think about creating an overall app architecture that users can flow through. Right? You have to think about creating if this, then that type of scenarios where, if a user does this in my app, then this happens. Okay, so you just have to change the way that you probably currently think about things. Now, this is fun for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be fun. You just have to be open to doing that. If you're the type of person who really doesn't like stepping outside of their comfort zone, who really hates stepping outside of their wheelhouse and doesn't like to think about or think through problems and think up new solutions, then you might not enjoy using no-code tools enough to leverage them long term. You don't have to use them forever, but again, you want to make sure that you're still enjoying the journey. It just makes building your business a lot more fun, right? So the last con is more of a perceived one. And this is that you are limited in what you can do with no code. Okay. I say this is a perceived drawback to using no code tools because I see, hear, and read about people talking about this a lot. But in reality, I disagree. So the perception is that when you're using no code tools, you're really limited to templates or to functionality, that you're only limited to what the tool allows you to do. And that's true, right? If you're using a tool, you can only use it in the way that it is meant to be used. But there are tons and tons of tools. So what a lot of people do is they look at a no-code tool and it doesn't suit their needs. And so they automatically think, well, no code is not the solution for me because it's too limiting. But again, there are lots and lots of different no-code tools. And we already talked through how there are different categories of no-code tools, right? You can kind of string no-code tools together, or you can build something outright from scratch. And all of these happen on different types of platforms, right? So instead of thinking that you are limited, if you've thought this before, look for the type of platform that actually suits your needs and know that the more customized you want to get, the more control you want, the more time and effort you will need to put into actually creating your app, because you're going to have to use a platform that allows for that customization and that control. Okay. So remember that there are lots and lots of tools you can use. So if you feel like you're limited, or if you read that you might be limited, that is really just a perception. And usually it's due to a lack of just finding the right tool. Okay. All right. So our last big question is, can you use no code long term, or will you have to move away to potentially a coded solution down the road? Now, this is a question I see a lot, and it's a really good question because a lot of people are worried that they're going to start by using no code tools, and then eventually they're just going to have to throw everything away and completely rebuild everything they've created using a coded solution or outsourcing to a traditional development agency. Doesn't sound very fun, right? But I want you to think about this a little bit differently. Now, I want to go through an example of our own and how we have both used no-code tools to build out certain things, and also switched away from using or from building certain things from scratch and to paying more for a solution. Okay, because there's a time and a place for everything, and it's important to think through this in a way that kind of applies to the stage you're at with your own business and with your own app. And I also want you to think through it in a little bit more logical of a way, in a more step-by-step way. So when we were first starting out, we were creating standalone training, right, courses, and we built our own LMS, our own learning management system, from scratch because we could, right? We had built those skills, so we were already able to build different tools that we needed, and it allowed us to build something that saved us money because we built it ourselves versus paying for something. And it allowed us to customize the solution to our exact needs. And we use that for a long time. And being able to build something like that is really beneficial. If you look at other learning management systems out on the market, a lot of them can get really expensive, and a lot of them are just overkill for what you might need when you're first starting out. So we built our own. But over time, we grew, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that we did build out these solutions ourselves. We were creating more scalable solutions from a business standpoint, because while we were spending the time to build out these tools, we were saving a lot of money. And we were also saving a lot of time by just being able to iterate quickly. So as soon as we started bringing users on board, we were able to see what needed changing, and we didn't have to then find a different solution or collaborate with a team of developers to try and change that. We were able to move really quickly. But again, like I said, we scaled to a point where spending the extra time ourselves now maintaining and growing this LMS was no longer worth it to, I should say instead, it was more valuable for us to be able to use an out-of-the-box solution, right? So we started with no-code tools. We started with something we built ourselves to allow us to gain really quick traction and to scale a lot more easily. But once we got to the point where spending the time was not as valuable as paying for that time, right? Then we switched to an LMS that we now pay for, so that we can get that time back, focus that time on other priorities within the business, and still provide a really great experience for our users, right? For our customers. So that's something to think about when you're questioning whether or not you can use no-code tools for the long run. Now, there are other scenarios that we'll talk through, but just from a root level, think through that, okay? Starting with no-code tools, building quick traction, being able to scale quicker earlier, and then having to move away from no-code tools or choosing to move away from no-code tools. Not a bad thing. That's actually a really good thing. And by following that path, you're really leveraging what's available to you in the best ways possible, in the ways that are going to benefit you and your business the most. So it's really important to make sure you're thinking about the fact that switching away from no-code tools, if you ever need to, it's not a bad thing. It's actually usually indicative of a really good thing. It's indicative that you are scaling, and now you have a need to switch over if you have the need. So you can also look at this in the opposite way. So in our business, we have also used out-of-the-box solutions, so existing apps, to start out. Okay, so with the LMS example, we started out with a no-code solution that we built, and then we switched over later on, right? Well, you can take the opposite approach, start out with an out-of-the-box solution, something that you're not building from scratch. And then once you get to the point of needing something more customized, then you can build it with no code. Okay, so you just really have to think about where is your time best invested, and how can you leverage what's available to you at different times. So you can start with no code and move away, or you can start with something pre-built and then move over to no code, okay? But those are just examples of how you can think about this when you're using no-code tools within an existing business, right? Like we have ourselves. But you also have to ask the question, which you might have, and that's, what if your entire business is the app, right? So you're using no-code tools and you're creating this app, which is the business that you're scaling. Well, what if you have to switch away from no-code tools at some point, and And switching from no-code tools means essentially rebuilding your entire business or the entire app. Okay. A few things I want you to think about. Now, number one, you may never get to that point. We have people who are concerned about that when they first start using no-code tools because maybe they've read about that being the case. And it's true that no-code tools, they can't do everything, right? And we have another video that talks about what no-code can and can't do. But if you are the type of person who falls into any of the categories that we talked about of types of apps you might be building, right? Apps to move away from your career into a more scalable business model, apps to, build quick traction with a startup, things like that, then you don't really have to be thinking about that. I want to make sure you're thinking about the right things at the right time. So when you're using no-code tools, for example, we like to use Bubble as our no-code platform. And when you're using these no-code platforms, you might look at other apps that are built on them, and these apps might not perform well. And they might seem slow, they might not seem scalable, and that might worry you. But what I want you to think about is how we talked about the fact that when you have a lot of power within a certain no-code app development platform, so with Bubble, for example, you have complete control over everything you build. When you have that amount of power, it means you have to know how to use the tool correctly because it's up to you to build the app. They're not limiting you, really. You need to use the tool to create your app in a scalable way. So if you see apps built on certain platforms that seem like maybe they don't perform well, maybe they're not all that scalable, and that makes you worried, think about that. Okay, think about the back end of things. Well, has this app actually been built in a scalable way? Maybe it's not the app development platform. Maybe it's just the way this individual app was built. And we do see this happening quite a bit because we're looking at, tools that are built largely for people who don't have technical backgrounds. And so they don't understand those development fundamentals that we talked about. Maybe they haven't learned how to use the tools correctly. So when that type of person, someone who is coming in and just kind of learning as they go, which is totally normal, but if you're learning as you go, then your app probably isn't going to be scalable on the first try unless you're getting help with it, right? So just keep in mind that you may never have to move away from no-code tools. If you fall into any of the categories we talked about in terms of what type of app you're trying to build, you don't need to be thinking about that right now. And if you're worried because you've seen other apps that maybe don't seem like they perform well or they aren't scalable, well, keep in mind that the way in which you build the app matters a lot. You have to build it in a scalable way, and that's under your control. Okay, so the last thing with all that in mind is if you did get to a point where you decided you did need to move away from no-code tools and you need to move over to a coded solution. Let's say it did happen, even though it might not, it probably won't. Let's say it did. At that point, you'd have to think about where your business would be for you to need to switch away from no-code tools. If you have scaled to a point where that is needed, it's a really good problem to have, right? So, I don't want you to think about this as something that should keep you away from using no-code tools, right? Just the potential of maybe at some point down the road, you could potentially have to switch away from no-code tools. Don't let that be the thing that keeps you from starting to use them altogether, because the amount of benefit you can get from starting with no-code tools, whether you decide to stay with no-code or not down the road, the amount of benefit it so outweighs any potential drawbacks. And I speak to that from experience, our own experience as a company, the experience of our clients, and just tons of other people in the no-code space. So are no-code tools right for you? In my opinion, yes. 1,000 times yes. They are right for you. No matter what app you're building, they're right. And they are right in a lot of different use cases and at a lot of different times. Okay, so there's not a black and white answer to this, because no code tools can be leveraged in so many different ways. And my hope is that through all of this, you have seen enough use cases to make you feel comfortable with at least getting started, because just being able to finally move forward with your app idea and actually start bringing it to life, just being able to move forward with that is such a big benefit, because you can finally start taking real steps toward growing your business rather than wondering, what if, right? Could I use no code, or should I go another route? Just try it. Just try it and see the benefit, and grow from there. And there are so many different use cases. All right. I hope that was helpful. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning of this training that will help you if you are moving forward with no code tools. So if you want to start creating your app, or maybe if you've already started and you just want to make sure you're moving forward in the right direction, we have a free workshop. It goes through some of the development fundamentals we talked about. It talks about some of the tools. It really just walks you through those initial strategic steps to make sure you're heading forward on the right path. You can join in on that by heading to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. You can sign up, go through the training. It's going to help you move forward so much more strategically with your no-code app. All right, again, I hope that was helpful for you. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.